Hey cats, Eddbud here. Today I'm going to talk about why I don't think Nike are ever going to release a Pegasus Turbo 3. Nike's much loved React and ZoomX midsole equipped shoe, minus a carbon plate of course, seems to have come to an end, doesn't it? I don't think we're going to get a Pegasus Turbo 3. It was certainly a brief stay in the lineup, only about 3 years. But the swoosh brand seems to have shelved this one pretty quickly, very much like people keep shelving the Deus Ex computer game series. Very sad about that. Some runners love the Peg 35 turbos, and also the Pegasus Turbo 2. So why call time on this model so soon? Today I'm going to be discussing some of the reasons why Nike might be shelving this model. If you're new to the channel guys, please help us out by hitting that subscribe button, and also clicking the bell below for notifications of when we launch those new videos for you. And it really helps the channel out if you give this video a thumbs up like too. Dankeschön. I've been enjoying both versions of the Pegasus Turbo over the last few years, and I was still holding out a little bit of hope that a version 3 might be released in the next few months. But I've got to be honest, I've come to the realization that it's probably not going to happen. Sometimes we're surprised by a great band reuniting, the bandmates putting aside their differences, like McCalmont and Butler for example. They produced a great first album back in the 90s and then got back together in the early noughties. But I think there's more chance of the Gallagher brothers getting back together and reforming Oasis than there is of us getting a Pegasus Turbo 3. And here's why I believe that. Firstly, I wanted to get a better idea of why the Pegasus Turbo was so good in the first place. So I got my pair of Pegasus 35 turbos, and I got my saw and I cut them in half. So we kind of know quite a bit about the upper, but what about the midsole of this shoe? Looking at the actual stack heights listed for a brand new version of this shoe, they had about 28mm in the heel, and I think it was about 18mm in the forefoot. Now mine have got about 250 odd, possibly 300 miles. I've used them for walking shoes after about 150 of running. So there's loads and loads of miles into these, so I'd expect something a little lower, and I found I got 26mm in the heel, and 17mm in the forefoot, so barely compressed at all, and that's after a fair old few miles. That's pretty commendable, I think. It just goes to show that the combination of foams there is very resilient and durable. When we look at the distribution of foam here, it really is apparent that a plate of some type could have sat along the join of the React and the ZoomX. I found that the shoe had real pop when I first got it, but it did start to bottom out around about 10 miles for me. I think that's mainly due to the fact that it's just so flexible in the midsection of the midsole. Where we look at the distribution of React though, it's very clear that it's higher in the heel area and then very low in the mid to forefoot. I was pretty surprised by that actually. It's almost all ZoomX in the forefoot area, just a very thin slither of React underneath. And the actual outsole rubber was really thin as well. Although I have to say I didn't have any problems with it wearing away. It's pretty much just as good as the V2 version that I've got, which only has about 100 miles on it. When you look at some of the stack heights that we've got now in 2021, it does make the Pegasus Turbo midsole look quite meagre really. I think we can almost ignore the visual aesthetic flair. I mean, it's just presented a problem for Nike, hasn't it? Many people sadly choose to take off their shoes by standing on the back of them, and of course with the way this shoe's designed, that's going to cause a real issue. I'm not saying that all of the problems with that heel flare are to do with that, but I think some of them might be. Absolutely not advised that you do that with this shoe, but when you consider all that's holding together those two bits of the foam midsole are some glue and this paint overlay over both the React and ZoomX section, then it's no wonder that they came apart. You can also see on this close-up that the paint started flaking away at the join of the foam sections as well. It really does mimic the shape and contour that we've seen so many times on those other cookie cutter carbon plate shoes. Pretty much everybody has adopted that sort of spoon-like ladle shape when using the shoe. I did find that that rubberless section in the middle of the outsole was extremely flexible. I think some people might have even found it quite unsupported there, and some runners probably found it odd, and it could have caused some arch-related pain. This isn't one of those Nike shoes that was really prominent in the arch either. It really does bend heavily across the whole of the midsole, this shoe. Like whichever way you choose to flex it, it will move, especially dead in the center. Deceptive as ever, you can see that the foam cups around the foot and the perceived midsole stack height in the heel, at least, is much higher. I don't think anybody can really complain about the cushioned nature of this shoe. It's certainly a very light shoe as well, and seldom that we can say that. It's only about 25 to 30 grams heavier in my size than the next percent. I mean, they even made the Turbo 2 a little bit lighter than the Pegasus 35 Turbo. The uppers worked for me in both versions, though I did feel a little bit more lace pressure over the top of the foot in the version 2. But the trade-off was a little bit more toe box room and height, which I did enjoy. Brand new pairs of this shoe are still available years after the launch, and I think that does say a lot about this model. Did Nike cut this model perhaps because it didn't fit in with the whole carbon plate money-making factory that they've got right now? That's all people want to hear about, isn't it? Carbon plate shoes and Zoom X. Is it a shoe perhaps that just didn't really fall into a category that they thought they could sell? There's a big trend, isn't there, at the moment for carbon or nylon plate shoes. I mean, look at the endorphin speed. If you stuck a nylon plate into the Pegasus Turbo 2, that'd be some shoe. Other brands have been incorporating plates or rods into the midsoles of their shoes and experimenting a great deal, designing cheaper alternatives to their top-end race models. Nike in the main have only really been marginally successful with that avenue. There's been quite lukewarm receptions really for the Tempo Next Percent, and perhaps a slightly more successful vibe surrounding the Zoom Fly 3. I mean, when you compare the Pegasus Turbo line up against the Invincible run, for example, there's just no comparison, is there? Now, after I'd cut open this shoe, it really did get me thinking that there's another shoe that actually is very similar to this, but you wouldn't perhaps think of it initially. You guys know that I love the Adios 6 from Adidas, a dual foam midsole shoe with a distribution that's not all that different to the Pegasus Turbo. Light Strike Pro in the forefoot, with a little bit of light strike underneath, a very minimal airy upper. Does that sound familiar to you? Though, torsion underneath the foot to minimize that flex in the midsole. It just won't twist all that much. Very durable rubber here in both the forefoot section of the shoe and in the heel. Hang on, have Adidas inadvertently made the Pegasus Turbo 3? Is this the true successor to Nike's dual foam shoe? I think Adidas have kept all of the things that made the Pegasus Turbo a real winner. Yes, it's not perhaps so soft as the Pegasus Turbo, but that was one of the things that people complained about, that it was a little bit too soft. I mean, it's still an extremely forgiving shoe, this one. No foam adhesive issues here or strange heel flares. Plus, it's £50 cheaper at retail than the Pegasus Turbo was. We got to remember, guys, that Nike makes shoes to make money, don't they? You know, they're not doing it out of the goodness of their hearts. They aren't worried to drop lines if they haven't got mass appeal. If the shoes aren't selling, then they'll just stop making them and sell off everything at discount price. Perhaps the large number of returns for this model, due to some of the manufacturing flaws, the muddied naming of the shoe perhaps at the start. It was the Pegasus 35 Turbo, which kind of made out it was a improved version of the Pegasus 35, which it really wasn't. And of course that very high price of 160 Earth credits UK when it first launched. I think all of those different factors have helped to contribute to its demise. Adidas seem to have noted all of the things that made the Pegasus Turbo work very well, and with only a very minimal weight increase have created a shoe that is actually better than the Pegasus Turbo at a really attractive asking price as well. So maybe this is the Pegasus Turbo 3 that I've been waiting for. I just didn't realise it. It certainly can move, that's all I'll say. Almost at 100 miles in this one, guys, so do look out for my 100 mile review coming very soon. Do you think we'll ever see a Pegasus Turbo 3? Not sure why I'm holding this up. Here's the rest of the shoe anyway. I was quite amazed at the construction. There's a lot of glue in here, and it does make you appreciate just how padded the heel was in the Pegasus 35 Turbo compared to the version 2. Absolutely amazed at how compressive and actually in good condition this foam still is after all those miles. Do you think we're going to see a Pegasus Turbo 3, guys? I think it's probably a no. Let me know your views and opinions down in the comments. A musical interlude for you. I think over the last 18 months or so we've seen a lot of division in the world, haven't we? And I kept coming back to one particular album that seems to talk about uniting people, some sort of common goal, accepting each other's differences or difference in opinion, and that was Turn 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 by the Byrds. Fantastic album. I'm a bit of a sucker for chimey Rickenbacker sounds, especially if they've been compressed a little bit. To everything there is a season, turn, turn, turn. is one of my faves on this one, obviously. I really like Satisfied Mind as well. Really beautiful sound on this record. Everything just gels together so nicely in this bright, sort of chimey, sparkly kind of way. Of course, the great track, The Times They Are A-Changing, is on here, originally written by a very famous fellow. You may have heard of him. There's some cool alternate takes on this album as well. I think I picked this one up probably in the late 90s, I think it was. There's some cool like stereo mixes and some slightly different variations on the tracks. I always used to be quite obsessed with the Rickenbacker built-in compressed sound. I know a lot of it was played on a 12 string as well, which adds an even more lush sort of nature to the instrumentation. So do go and check that one out, guys. Turn, Turn, Turn by The Byrds. So we had Pegasus and then The Byrds. Yeah. Hope you've enjoyed the video today, guys. If you have, please remember to hit that subscribe button and click the bell below for notifications of when I launch a new salvo at you. And it really helps the channel out a great deal in terms of the YouTube algorithm if you give this video a thumbs up, like, and share it with your running buddies. My name's Eddbud, and I'll be seeing you